He cut in front of my cab in a blue helmet and never looked back. I followed him off my route and into streets I shouldn't have entered. The buildings closed in, sound compressed until it lived inside your skull. Each lamp hit the helmet, then let it vanish. My rear view threw my own pale face back, like I was the one under glass. I thought about dropping back. Then the red caught us. He stopped. I stopped. The bike idled, that deep chest thump kind of noise. Steam climbed from a manhole, curling past his boots. The air tasted of diesel, onions, wet concrete. He never moved, just angled his head so the light kissed his visor. Green. He stayed still. A horn from behind broke it. His head snapped forward, the bike leapt. And I went after, not choice, just instinct. We threaded tighter blocks, neon half dead, trash wet on the sidewalks. He kept close enough to pull me in, far enough to stay untouchable. Past a pawn shop shuttered for years, his roar cut, then returned, like he was ghosting himself on purpose. At AT, he stopped. Brake light painted a red wound on the asphalt. He turned, visor reflecting my beams, raised a hand, flat, commanding. Left would have been my out. I stayed behind him. He dropped the hand, throttle snapped, and the game stretched longer. By the time we slid under the Williamsburg span, it was just us, streets folding in tighter, city shrinking to a board. And I couldn't tell who was moving the pieces anymore. The next light froze him like a stage cue. Helmet bathed in sodium yellow, steam curling around his boots. He didn't run it, just sat, idling. My wipers dragged a dry swipe across misted glass, louder than it should have been. I eased up half a car length behind. The block was empty except for a deli with a dying sign. Open blinking O, P, then whole again, then not. He tilted his head just enough to catch my beams across his visor. No nod, no wave. Just that pause, thick as wet wool. Problem? I called out, window cracked. He shook his head once, precise, mechanical. Then clutch tapped, bike rolling forward like nothing happened. The streets pinched tighter. Docks, dumpsters, bricks sweating under weak lamps. My tires picked up grit, crunching under the hum. Every few blocks he'd drift near the curb, slow like he might stop, then dart forward sharp, testing me. We crossed Avenue D where the lamps thinned. Darkness pooled. Only light was a laundromat's fogged window. Machines spinning. A woman slumped at the counter, chin on her palm, staring past her own reflection. Didn't look up as we passed. He braked sudden at an alley tagged in layers of red and blue. Exhaust died. He leaned in like the graffiti mattered. For a beat, I thought he'd dive into it. Then he straightened, rolled on. At the next corner, he stopped hard, swung a leg off, stood easy, visor catching stray light. I rolled close, engine low. You know where you're going? I asked. Half visor lift, just a jawline, a slice of eye glinting. Yeah, you following? I should have bailed. Should have cut right. Found my way to FDR, let the night close behind me. Instead, guess I am. Visor snapped down. He mounted fluid, tail light flaring, then dimming to a steady red pulse. We slipped through blocks I hadn't worked in years. Garment warehouses dead, but still breathing faint dye when the wind shifted. His roar turned narrow streets into tunnels. Twice we crossed lights alone, the emptiness so complete it felt staged. My hands clamped the wheel until the leather warmed under them. He slowed near a fence strung with razor wire, containers stacked like toys under sodium glow. Didn't stop, just showed me, then pulled away. By then, I'd stopped watching the clock. The meter ticked in sync with his exhaust, one rhythm folding into another until it felt like we were running on something older than time. We cut left, then right, into streets that didn't belong to fairs, patchwork asphalt buzzing my teeth, warehouses leaning over us like they wanted to close the lid. His bike swayed just enough to feel like a dare. At the far end, one lamp, burned over a warehouse door. He stopped under it, engine low, the red tail light painting my hood. I pulled up even, no buffer this time. That lamp whined louder than both our engines. Thin, high, drilling if you let it. He killed his bike, and the hum owned the block. Boots scraped grit as he stepped off. Helmet stayed down. He didn't face me first. He stared at the door, like it owed him something. "What's here?" I asked. Head turned my way, paws stretched, then, "Not here for the place." Voice flat, but it carried weight like stone. He tugged one glove off, checked something in his palm, small, quick, then hit it again. Glove back on. One swing, he was in the saddle. "Come on." We threaded out of the block. Buildings pressed close. Windows black except for one TV glow. Water dripped steady from an AC unit, each splash counting seconds. Under the L, pillars tattooed in layers, smell of rust and rain thick even on a dry night. That's where I noticed the sedan, a silver one. 2 blocks back, lights washing the corner too long before rolling after. The biker didn't glance, but his shoulders squared. He knew. We slid past an all-night bakery. Fan pumping hot sugar, yeast heavy enough to cut the oil stink. My gut twisted, not hungry, just reminded that the world still had sweetness. At the next corner he slowed, scanning exits like a man counting doors. Then throttle snapped. Left turned sharp into a lane barely wide enough for me. Brick scraped close, my mirror kissing air. Halfway through he coasted, killed the noise. We listened. A clank. Metal on metal, followed by a freight elevator groaning awake somewhere ahead. The lane spit us into a boxed yard. Warehouses, forklifts under tarps, one yellow cone of light. He stopped dead center, visor fixed on a strip of glow at a loading door. "You gonna tell me what this is?" I asked. Through the glass. "You've been here before." Nothing around me rang a bell, until a gull's cry bent against brick, echo coming back crooked. My chest clenched. I had heard that twist of sound years ago. Before I could answer, he rolled for the gap between buildings. I followed. Gravel crunched, diesel stung the air. We spilled onto a run of lights, stepping stone pools pulsing in rhythm. His taillight flared red, then fell into shadow. And I knew, this wasn't just a ride anymore. A slam cracked somewhere ahead, metal on metal, echo running the length of the block. He rolled off the throttle so the sound could breathe. I matched him, engine low, the street narrowing until brick pressed air into strips. His left hand came up, palm down. I killed my headlights. That silver sedan slid to the corner behind us, idled. Lights on, but it didn't follow. Just cut a beam across brick like it was probing. The biker pointed his visor toward a seam where a bent sign read "NO" through trucks. He slipped in. I followed, tires ticking over screws and glass. The smell shifted, tar, rope, pure air. Halfway down, a watchman leaned under a shelter, cigarette glowing. He nodded at the helmet, froze when he clocked me, then tucked the gesture away like he wished he hadn't seen a thing. The seam spit us into a yard, pallets stacked high, forklift frozen mid-lift, one bulb buzzing. Sedan didn't follow, but I felt it, waiting. He cut his engine. The quiet made the filament whine thin. I kept mine running, wool vibration steadying my hands. He pulled something small from his jacket, turned it in the light like a coin, then pocketed it. "Careful. Practiced. You keeping me blind on purpose?" I asked. "Only until the light's useful." "Useful how?" "To see who shows." We both stared back at the seam. Nothing came. Just wrappers skittering against fence, the hollow slap of water against dock metal. He stepped closer to my door. The helmet's blue shell was scuffed white in crescents where it had kissed concrete. Up close he wasn't big, just balanced, like all riders are. "How long you been nights?" he asked. Long enough to know when someone's not lost. A click of his tongue inside the helmet. "Marking time." You heard this echo before? I started to say no, then gulls cried. Two sharp calls, second one bent. The sound came back wrong, crooked, like it had turned a corner without us. My chest tightened. I had heard it. Different car, different job, same bend in the sound. He tilted his head, like that's what he expected, tapped my door with a knuckle. Headlights. I lit the yard. Shadows pulled back, opening a slit behind the pallets. Just enough space for a car if you folded the mirrors in. He swung onto the bike, visor down. Stay on my line. The tail light glowed red, smeared in dust, leading me toward the slit. We squeezed through that slit like the city hadn't meant to leave it open. Pallets scraped my mirrors, dust falling soft across the hood. On the other side, the ground turned rough, gravel crunching under the tires. The river smell hit strong, brine, rust, something oily riding on the current. The bike's tail light pulsed ahead, cutting red across chain link shadows. He didn't gun it. He crept, keeping the noise down, like both of us were trespassing. Which, maybe we were. We came out onto a strip that looked half forgotten. Warehouses on one side, the black stretch of water on the other. Sodium lamps flickered every 100 feet, spilling a sick yellow haze, leaving gaps of dark in between. That's when the gulls called again. Two sharp cries, the second bent, same crooked echo. My skin went tight. He tilted his helmet, listening, then throttled up. I followed. At the far end, a pier jutted into the river, wood slick with algae. A lone van sat crooked at the edge, headlights off. Its back door stood open, nothing inside but shadows. He stopped 10 yards out. I pulled alongside, engine low. The van was empty. No movement, no voices, just the faint slap of water under the pilings. But it felt staged, like we were supposed to see it this way. He killed his engine again. Sat still, visor reflecting the sodium glow. I waited for him to move, to speak, to give this ride its reason. Instead, he turned his head toward me. For the first time, the visor lifted clean. Eyes pale, rimmed red like he hadn't slept in days. Jaw cut tight, lips dry. Not a stranger's face exactly. More like one I should have remembered but couldn't place. You keep driving nights, he said. Voice low, scraped raw. You start to follow echoes. They circle back. He dropped the visor before I could answer. One kick, the bike fired. He swung it around, back toward the city. The van stayed empty. The gulls cried once more. I let him lead, taillight pulling me through dark gaps toward noise and neon. By the time we hit the first lit block again, the meter had run far past anything I'd seen. I shut it off without touching it, eyes still flicking down like I expected digits to change. He didn't slow until Houston. There, under a green light. He braked, let me pull even. Helmet turned my way. Hand lifted, 2 fingers, not wave, not warning. Then he was gone, throttle screaming down the avenue. I sat under the green until it turned yellow, then red. The cab empty, engine ticking, my own hand still holding that echo. And just like that, another night crawled back. Different passenger, different weight. A woman who carried silence louder than any sound I'd heard since. But that's another ride. One I'll tell next time. If you're still out here with me, hit subscribe and we'll keep going into the next night. The light changed. I held still a beat longer and let the city breathe around me.